it's time to introduce our speaker, Martha Gallahue. It is her personal purpose to contribute to the design of right relationships within oneself and with others, nature, and the greater whole of which we are all a part. She is an ethical culture leader and also has been involved in the National Ethical Service, the NES, a non-governmental organization that the American Ethical Union sponsors at the UN. There, she was a founding member of the Conference of NGOs and led the Universal Ethics Working Group. She was also founding member of the Spiritual Caucus, the Climate Change Working Group, the Global Movement for the Culture of Peace, and the Coalition on Global Citizenship, among other initiatives. I don't know how she did all that, but she's an amazing woman. She now represents an organization dedicated to harmony, the United Religions Initiative, the largest grassroots interfaith organization in the world. Speaking today on refugees, our best teachers for global citizenship, please help me welcome leader Martha Gallahue.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for having me. I wanted to do a little preamble to explain what is up there on your wonderful screen, which is that there's a premise here. When we talk about refugees, we focus a lot on the problem, and actually I've realized over the years that there's no good in speaking about a problem unless we can invite a solution. And the solution needs to be at a higher level than the level at which the problem was caused, according to Einstein, as we know. So I've been involved in the global project for human evolutionary change for about a year, because its purpose is to shift our focus from being individual atoms in a lonely world to being universally human. And it's actually a consciousness change. It's a thought shift. And there's a technology to it. So I'm impressed with this group, and for now, I'm going to ask that when you hear the talk, that you keep thinking about yourselves, ourselves, as one entity, as one participant in a human species, one body, if you like. And we'll come back to that at the end. So here goes the talk. On Friday night, I went to bed and was thinking about this talk and thinking about how am I going to shape it? How am I going to get the message across? And I had a pretty terrible dream. I won't go into the details because it was violent. But basically, when I thought about it and sat with it for 45 minutes or so, I thought, yes, well, there's lots of interpretations of the dream. But the thing that came to mind was our country is on the verge of suicide. And when I thought about how this dream communicated to me that our country is on the verge of suicide, I thought about that in terms of our vision. That when we have this marvelous Statue of Liberty, which I still go to after living here for 40 years, where do I go and what do I draw from that experience but the promise of liberty? And every time I go, the United States had. And when I read the Gettysburg Address, and I think about Abraham Lincoln and what he stood for, remember the context of that talk? He had listened to somebody go on for 2.5 hours in the blazing sun, and then he gave this little 7-minute talk. And what was it that he talked about that went down in history, but was the birth of a new freedom? That's what America stands for. That's what the United States is about. And that's why the United Nations was founded, to spread that message that basically we're more alike than we are different, and that we can have different cultures, and that we can have different ways to live well. And we can have different sources of wealth. So when I thought about this dream, and I thought, well, then who's my audience? And I know we had an audience of a year and 2 months and 3 years. Where did they go? They're not here anymore. And is there anybody here over 90? Yay! So we have an intergenerational group that goes in this society from 1 year to 90 years. Do we have any refugees who are here? Eva. Fabio. Germany, Eva? From
Austria.
Austria. Fabio. From Haiti. Great. Soviet Union. And do we have any children of refugees?
Russian, Poland. Hungary, Czechoslovakia.
Romania.
My daughter's mother was from Iran.
My daughter-in-law's mother worked in the canning factory in the Bronx from Puerto Rico. And my son-in-law's parents worked in restaurants as waiters, even though he was a black belt 9th degree karate expert, and she was a master calligrapher from Japan. And our, yes,
Grandfather from Ukraine.
Ukraine. So here we are. Yes.
My father was from Vienna.
Vienna. Here we are, a polyglot from different countries, from different continents. And I would like you to come to this topic from that perspective. Because the topic, the way it's being discussed, is a sham. We're being led to think about fueling terrorism. What is that about? That is about fear. That is about less than 1% of the entire migratory pattern that is going on right now. Even though there are 20 million refugees, there are 244 million in transmigration patterns. The world is changing. And if we take the opportunity to think about this, we can say, and we're a part of it. How are we a part of it? First of all, by remembering. How far back do you have to go? Most of us, not very far. And what do we want? What do we want for our future? I am proud that all my grandchildren are bilingual, that my grandson's first language is Spanish, and that my granddaughters are in Japanese school, and they can speak Japanese, and they're learning to write it, and it's very difficult from an English standpoint. And I can tell you that my granddaughter was chased in school for being an Oriental. So if we say, well, what needs to happen that affects us that we are talking about, perhaps what we might think about is the change that the presence of refugees or migrants have to bring to us. And that's where the title of my talk came from. And while I won't say a lot about it, I will say to you that global citizenship education is on the radar, that there are a lot of schools who are trying to grapple with it, that in Maplewood, New Jersey, our ethical education program is building itself around global citizenship because we think we can get the ethical culture, ethical core within the context of global citizenship. So I could almost stop talking now because in a way I've given the talk. Unless you might say, oh, all right, so you've landed in new thought, which really isn't new. But that I can promise you that when 1 or 5% of the world's population, including us, begins to think this way, something is going to change. So we know that in the areas where the greatest refugee population is moving from and toward is Syria, Afghanistan, and Somalia. While we know those things, we also can take 1 second to say why, and 10 minutes to say how, and why in terms of purpose. So let's look at why from 2 perspectives. The 1 second perspective, we know it's land and tribalism. We know that the Alawites are the minority in Syria, and they are very frightened, and so they're out to kill the rest of their tribes. We know that at the United Religions Initiative, that in Iran, multicultural, multi-religious means Shiites, Sunnis, Alawites, working together. You and I think, well, they're all the same. They're all Muslims. But they're truly not the same. We could say Black Lives Matter when we need to say all lives matter. And we have the opportunity to be thinking about ourselves. Those who are in migration are taking over the world in a good way. They're breaking down our silos. They're bringing different languages, different foods. They're bringing different levels of education. They're messing up our idea of what class is. How many of you have taken a ride with a taxi driver who's actually a doctor? How many have you known that experience? How many of you have been able to say to your children, you want to be a cabinet maker? You don't want to go to school? Fine, just be a good one. And that we would not be there. We would not be thinking these things if we didn't have the challenge of, first of all, recognizing that there's a need. And the second part, which we find it harder to do, is to engage with it. Now, I want to qualify that because I'm going to make an assumption that whether you're members or not, for the most part, you're all doing good. Actively doing good. Actively involved in something that is transformative. But I'd ask us to think about, to what extent is it transformative in the context of the problem? For example, in ethical culture at Essex Society in Maplewood, we have a Syrian family, and we're providing were assigned different things. And then periodically, our contact people come and talk in our societies. And that's very good, and it makes us feel very good. It is addressing the problem on the level of the problem. Human beings have such an untapped resource inside. When we have the opportunity to think, to feel, to move outside the boundaries of our education, our tribe, even our assumptions, even our political parties, when we have the opportunity to move outside those boundaries, paradoxically, something more opens up. It's the kind of thing that artists know when they lose themselves, when they don't even know how the play's going to end, but they know that they must write it. Even when we are thinking about what it is to be a parent or to start a movement, we don't always know exactly what it's going to look like or who it's going to go, but where it's going to go. But if we stay connected to that sense inside, this still matters to me. This still matters. Something happens. And this is where the great ideas have come from. This is not new, but we're not living there now. And there's a great, great movement afoot to scare us all to death, to forget our creativity, to think about protecting ourselves, to think about safety. We worked on the question, the little kids worked on the question, where would you go if there was a war? And one of them said, to England. I've got family there. And that's where we go when we're children. We go to safety, as we should. And that we help ourselves in fear. When we become adolescents, we think, I'm not afraid of anything. I can go anywhere, do anything. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. A refugee child has no adolescence. A refugee child has to think all the time, where is the safest place? So in thinking about what does global citizenship look like and what's the interior part of it, think about universal human. That we've come to the place at the time of human evolution where maybe we've come to the top of what it is to be a human. I like Anders' talk, that we've gotten a sense of what it feels like to be a big shot. And I think Andrea put it very well, that she's in service. She's a big shot because she's figured out how to be in service to something that she agrees with and that she feels passionate about, and which paradoxically gives her something. That's pretty good. But what if, since in these times, we're not going to survive with that? Some people are going to survive, but there is some very heavy prediction that in 60 years, if we do nothing with climate change, if we do nothing with the wars that are going on, and we continue to insist on militarizing countries, as many as 90% of the population won't be here because there won't be land, there won't be water, there won't be air. So we could choose to be very frightened by that, and those of us who are older could say, well, my time's up, good luck to the grandchildren. the top of what it is to be fully human now to becoming beginners of the next phase of evolution. And what do we have to get out of it? We have our own survival to get out of it. And those of us who make it, and I'd like us to all imagine that every one of us here is part of the new wave. What would be different about us is that we would not be taking these territorial boundaries seriously, other than we would be appreciating the culture, we would be appreciating the food, we would appreciate the dance. We wouldn't change the difference. We wouldn't give anything good up at all. And we would have our preference. And you and I might decide that where we wanted to be would be in Cape Town, South Africa. And so that's where we would live. But what it means is that a new level of responsibility, of human responsibility, takes place in us. And that is that we're co-creators. And I have to tell you that, having come from traditional religion myself, that was blasphemy. That we should be co-creators. Only God can be one's creator. So let's take a look at ethical culture, where Alexander, who was a believer, he did believe in God, but he was trying to communicate within traditional religion that we had to take more responsibility for what was true. The truth is not something that is handed down other than the physical laws in which we live by, the cosmic laws in which we live by, and by the way, we're all the same material. So to be thinking of ourselves as star people, as the esotericists do, is not so far-fetched. But we have to find our place in this new world. So what if we started by thinking that we are at the beginning of something new? And that, yes, we honor every single human being who is dying right now, because they, in fact, are raising the urgency. They are making it important. But we also have to be honest and say, we can't fix it. It would be a good thing when Bashar Assad goes before the International Criminal Court. It would be a good thing. It would be a drop in the bucket as far as real change happens. So there's a new why. And the why is not a posteriori, looking backwards. The new why is, why is it that we might get ourselves together in a new way? And it has to be more than the fear. It has to be more than the terrible. It has to be finding that deep, deep place that you might be feeling right now, that we have something to offer human evolution itself. And if we don't offer it, we'll just become extinct. The planet will survive. The planet will be fine. The planet will heal. And then something, and yet the evolutionary process will have to start over. It's in terms of sentient life, in terms of conscious life. So the idea is, well, why not? Why not begin thinking of ourselves as one species? And that one species that doesn't know a lot because we haven't given a lot of attention to thinking about it. But we will put ourselves through the paces as the way we allow little children. We'll take a little space, We'll think inside. We'll recognize we are. It's self-evident, of course we're one species. And as you can see where I'm going, that refugees are the teachers about this. And we have an opportunity to engage, first of all, with those who survive, and with those who don't get it and don't understand. And we're not going to be able to persuade them to change differently. But things will change when we change. When we say, oh, you know, my Syrian friend Maggie, or my Haitian friend Fabio. If I may take a minute, Fabio, I do extend sympathies to you for what's happened in Haiti, and extend our welcome, which you have received from others many more times than I have ever dared. And I have invited you to ask us, what do you think refugees have to teach people like me? Do you want to take a stab? For those who don't know Fabio, Fabio is 18. He's been in this country for 5 years.
Something I can teach other people is mainly, having hope and love each other. The reason I said that is just like, sometimes when a bad thing happens, you realize, who really care about you, or who really don't care about you. And I think, in any type of way the way you define it, I think is for example, coming here, I never felt any hate from anybody. I think coming to the United States, I felt so much love, from my family, from people, from the ethical society, from everywhere. So I think welcoming people, helping people, and also we realize that we all human beings in another way. There is another person just like you around the world. For example, I was just coming to the train, and I've seen a lot of kids who go to the Comic-Con this weekend, and I'm looking at all those young people and how diverse they are. A kid from Kazakhstan is talking to somebody who's from South Africa, and they were talking about when they were kids, they were thinking about the same thing at the same time. And I was just looking at that, and I was like, that's amazing that this is something special to just observe.
So Fabio said, we're all human, that they teach us to be all human. I wanted to ask you before you went, do you ever feel sorry for yourself?
Not sorry, but I don't know, helpless, I guess. I think sometimes, especially, it's happening, everywhere, when you see, a homeless person and, asking for food, when when you see, homeless shelter, when you see certain things, when you see somebody suffering, you feel helpless, and you feel that you can't help, you can't, just talking to someone is something that is great. And I think, having a relationship with someone, I think a lot of times we all misunderstand things in terms of like, when we want to help, we just want to, give money, plan every single month, giving money every month. I think the real help is just, being with each other and all the time, and I think that's the real help. I think for me, I don't feel sorry. It's just like I feel helpless a little bit, but at the same time, I feel like I want to have hope for the next generation to feel the same way.
Another hand clap. Because Fabio, in many ways, is more grown up than we are. What I heard Fabio say was basically I don't have time to feel sorry for myself as an individual. And when he said, I feel helpless, that's really the hardest thing. To feel helpless and to be vulnerable. How is it one more black man died in our neighborhood? How is it? How can we stand that? The frustration. And how can we find a place where it will become unthinkable that we militarize police? Unthinkable. That comes when we look in the face of someone who's on the street and we know we can't help them, but we can at least express respect. We can smile. We can look them in the eye in the same way we would look at the President of the United States or Leonardo DiCaprio. We would set aside our sense of who's important and who's not important. And there is a chemical exchange that happens, a molecular exchange, when you have created contact with some human being. So helplessness can turn to vulnerability, not closetedness, which is what human beings who live as individuals continue to do. Hope is conviction about that which is unseen. Hope is the ability to stay passionately connected to the future that's aching to break through and hasn't happened yet. We have the opportunity to recognize there still is the birth of a new freedom possible in this country. There still is the opportunity to grow out of an adolescence that thinks it can be a policeman throughout the world. They can dare to say, I alone will solve the problem. Be careful of anybody who says that. For me, it was the priest in the pulpit. I learned to be careful. I don't know about that. So, what we are getting to is the sense of, well, hope then. We can do this with vision. The words have been said. We can do this with a sensibility that a lot of what our lives have been very creative. And it is a wonderful thing to do, to draw one's own, let's call it a template or a family tree, but within oneself. What were those special moments that really freed us up? What were those special moments that somehow they lent an enhanced sense of our own identity? And that out of it came a lot. One of my special moments, for example, was when I chose to marry the person that I did. I knew I would be living in New York City, and I thought, oh my God, I'm just a girl from southeastern Ohio in Appalachia. I have no answers. Sometimes I'd be out on the street in the 60s and not knowing which side I was on, because for the first time that we were picketing the unions. Because for some reason, I'm not quite sure. But that what happened, every good thing that enhanced my adult life happened here. And one of those things was working at the United Nations, which I did for the last 20 years. So it's a story of hope. If I can make it here, you can make it here. But here isn't necessarily the way many would. It isn't in a penthouse. It isn't running conservancy gardens, which is a very good thing. It's recognizing that what better place in this world but to understand what is it like to be a street person, a refugee, a migrant, from the standpoint of elevation, from the standpoint of prophecy? Prophets are people who say, make way for the new. They're not visionaries. They kind of don't know what the new is. But they say, change your ways. And that we live in an age of prophecy. So what does that look like now? I want to suggest to you that as bad as we hear the stories, and as inadequate as it is, and I'd be the first one to admit, just remember that the rhetoric, the collective rhetoric, still comes out of the United Nations, and it counts. So I have copies of both that global project and what's called the New York Declaration that was just passed on September 19th, that really states a lot of where we need to get to in terms of treatment of the refugees. Don't ask me why the countries all sign on to it at the same time. With the other hand, they're waging war or militarizing police. Or, don't ask me why, but these countries did sign on. And what they committed to was to protect the human rights of all refugees and migrants regardless of status, women and girls, ensure that refugee and migrant children are receiving education, look out for sexual and gender-based violence, you know the drill, deliver humanitarian aid. These countries agreed to that. Now, this doesn't mean tomorrow it's going to happen by any stretch of the imagination, because the countries do not see all problems are interrelated. That if you're going to really do this, where are you going to get the money? And what things are you going to take from? And how does it that we can find ways to enhance people's well-being without taking from those who don't really have that much to give anymore? So it's a challenge, but once the rhetoric is there, then there is the beginning of looking at what the solutions are and how to do it. So, for example, after the Nuremberg trials in the late 40s, you didn't get an international court until the 90s. And then even that is not really functioning because Israel, the United States, Russia, and China haven't signed up to it. But it exists, and it's solid, and it's fair, and they're practicing. And someday Assad will get it. But that's not the solution. The solution is in ourselves as part of a collective, and what we can call global citizens. That's the solution. To look at refugees as having the answer. Because they've grown up in many ways. Why did you clap for Fabio? Because he said grown-up things. He said things outside himself, beyond himself. Fabio lives in hope, not in victimization. Fabio knows people who died in the hurricane. But Fabio moves on, and through, and for. And you have created space for him to have a safe place, to recover, to forgive, to reconcile, and to teach Fabio. So our hope is in this migration process. We would like to have it different. We would like to have it peaceful. But do we want it to stop? No way. We would like it to happen without so much suffering. That's what we want. So when we think about this, think about it from the standpoint of the solution that is not yet happened. That's what keeps people going at the UN. It's so disappointing we don't have a woman Secretary General. It's so overdue. And there were qualified people. And the campaign went on, and I was part of the campaign, and it was fun and it was exciting. But you know the story politically, you lose until you win. And it's going to change. But what they did pick is they picked a former head of state. That's the first thing. Most of the ambassadors within the missions are bureaucrats, and they are great people to talk to. They're diplomats, and they'll say anything you want to hear. But they do what their heads of states tell them to. Now he's in the front wire and as a former head of state. The other thing is Guterres, Antonio Guterres from Portugal, was behind this New York Declaration. He's the one that has been agitating for years to say you cannot have universal human rights and treat migrants the way they're being treated. We had no policy about them. They were the forgotten group, and they're still forgotten groups. But what we can know is every time we mainstream a forgotten group, whether because it's gotten so large that it's undeniable, or whether because we have worked within ourselves and we know from within that place it's unthinkable. So we don't argue with people. We don't need to convert them. We simply say, we're going here. You want to come with me? And as you will find, everyone here has got 5, 10, 20 followers. So I thank you for listening to me. I think we have a great future if we dare, if we remember our past. And I know that I had a very good closing, which I can't for the life of me remember what it was. So let us leave on a laugh. Thanks so much.